You are eating way too much protein.
High protein diets, all the rage, but do we really need that much?
At least that's what this article and dozens of health agencies are trying to say. This latest protein scare is misleading millions and might even be killing them. But is this just another well-marketed lie? Who are the people spreading it and why? According to this piece, it seems we've all been duped into this protein craze, specifically these protein-obsessed Americans supposedly eating more than double the amount our bodies actually need. But hold your protein shakes, everyone, because this is not just a huge claim saying that we need to eat way less. It's a claim based on little, if any, strong evidence around our recommended daily intake. We're talking crazy low, like eating a few dozen grams a day. Where is this actually coming from, though? We've got several different media sources all coming together to say that protein is bad, and their main source for this claim? The USDA. At first I thought, oh, this is just going to be about bodybuilders eating way too much, but no, pregnant women, elderly folk, children, all eating too much according to them. Recommendations so laughably low, it feels like propaganda to keep us all weak. Recommendations from the same people who are telling us meat is bad, and sunlight is bad, and exercise is bad. And what is their solution? Some of you are going to lose your mind at this. The narrative these companies are spinning, what they are promising if you follow these lies, sounds amazing. But the science tells a different story. I thought this was going to be a straightforward video, but this just led me from one source to another and another and another with bigger claims and bigger lies. Cancer, climate change, even Taylor Swift and Kanye came up on this. I would think I'd finally found some real answers, only to be left with even more questions. We're going really deep today, guys, not just the insane recommendations from nearly every major health agency and dozens of media companies, but the truth about protein extending our lives or giving us cancer. What changes we can make to our diet if that is all true. The reason calorie restriction keeps getting treated like the fountain of youth, and if none of this is true, how we can push back on this to have the healthiest, strongest, and best lives that we can. Today, we're dissecting the protein paradox and exploring the real impact of our dietary choices on our health, our longevity, and the environment. From the so-called protein-obsessed Americans to the potential benefits and pitfalls of cutting back. We're getting into what the science actually says about our protein-packed diets. Is protein a building block of a healthy lifestyle, or are you overeating it straight into an early grave? So whether you are a gym rat, a dietary skeptic, or simply curious about the latest health trend, this one's for you. So with all that out of the way, guys, my name's Andrew with Holistic Motion. Time to put this protein puzzle together. Let's get into it. I had probably 20 different people send this article to me from Vox, and I'll tell you who wrote it in a sec because it's maybe a bit biased and it also gets a little bit circular in its reasoning. But what it says is that we're just eating too much protein, saying Americans are obsessed with protein, that we are consuming twice the amount that we actually need.
Why are you so obsessed with me?
There's one problem with this, though, according to Don Layman, a professor of food science and human nutrition. These minimums are only to prevent malnutrition and death.
I have a big problem with the amino acid scores because they're incredibly low. They're way too low. And so they're established by the World Health Organization, by the FAO, which is really designed to prevent malnutrition in Africa.
How does this article come to this conclusion, though? Well, according to several legitimate sources, we only need 0.36 grams of protein per pound of body weight. And if you think that sounds a little low, congratulations, you have a brain. For me, at 200 pounds, that would mean 72 grams. There's a slight caveat to this where they say, oh, you might need a little bit more if you're pregnant or elderly or highly active. Nuance. I love that. But how much more do they say? Well, after following a few links, first to Harvard, then eventually to the USDA website, I found my way to their protein calculator, and I am shocked at their recommendations. Let's say I, Andrew, a beautiful 31-year-old, 200-pound lady got pregnant.
Folks, I'm a boy.
As a side note, the USDA wouldn't allow me to be a pregnant male, which I was shocked about. it's the government, you know? So at my height and weight, as a glowing pregnant lady, they want me to eat 91 grams of protein. And they want me eating more fat than protein and 500 grams of carbs. Are you kidding me? When I was like 10-ish% body fat at 190 pounds, I don't even think I was eating that many carbs. And I was lifting 90 minutes a day, 5 days a week. It asked me to put my pre-pregnancy weight in there. And if that's the case, at 200 pounds, there's almost no way that I would be maintaining my muscle, let alone growing a freaking baby. Obviously, I can't grow in either way, but yeah, let's get back to calling me a man though. If I'm a 66-year-old man, it's not that different. 73 grams of protein, more fat than protein, and up to 500 grams of carbs. But oh my God, if this wasn't already insane, get ready for this. This is the intake it wants me to eat as I am. These numbers are basically the same as what they said for a man who is twice my age with less activity, but it wants me eating up to 650 grams of carbs a day. Do you have any idea how much 650 grams of carbs is? Like for athletes, is that doable? Totally. Is it common? Somewhat. I have eaten that much before. But that is like 35 ounces or 1,000 grams of oatmeal, or 25 ounces or 700 grams of rice. That is literally so diabolical when you look at the ratio of carbs to protein, like 9 times as much carbs as protein. 9 times? I am in awe of this shit. Can you imagine a non-athlete eating that much? Can you imagine your grandfather eating nearly 2 pounds of rice a day? Listen, carbs are not bad, but the reality is that the average person will not be getting 650 grams of carbs from a whole food source like rice or oatmeal. They won't even be getting 400 or 300 grams from whole food. That is almost surely going to be entirely made of pre-made, boxed up, processed garbage. And it actually mentions this later, saying the switches that you make can affect your nutrition for better or for worse. For example, eating more protein instead of low-quality refined carbs like white bread and sweets is a healthy choice, though how healthy the choice is also depends on the total protein package. What is the protein package, you might be asking? It's literally just the non-protein nutrients in food. So with this sweeping recommendation to reduce protein intake, what does the science actually say? What would even be the benefit to cutting protein like this? In terms of longevity and health span, a lot of research does point to calorie restriction improving people's lives and health span in many different organisms, though there is an issue with that I'll cover in a sec. Calorie restriction being defined as a decrease of 20 to 40%. This is actually one of the reasons that pretty much every diet works to a certain degree. If someone is overweight and reduces their calories, they get healthier. Shocker. So that brings us to questions. Are they healthier because they decreased calories, which led to a weight decrease? Pretty much all research says yes to that, which of course begs the second question. Why were these macro calculators not limiting calories and absolutely skyrocketing carbs, since their supposed goal is longevity? The second question, of course, is whether or not the reduction of a specific macronutrient or the ratio of them is what is leading to all these benefits. This is what is called an interventional study. I'm gonna have to be a stupid science bitch for some of this.
You stupid science bitches couldn't even make my friends more smarter. Hey, you're right, stupid science bitch couldn't even make I more smarter.
If you don't know, protein is made up of something called amino acids, and amino acids activate something called the mammalian target of rapamycin, aka mTOR. If you don't care to hear about mTOR, or you just think it's too complicated, or you already know, you can skip to this timestamp on the screen. But this will explain a lot. Imagine your body is not just a city, but a metropolis on steroids. Steroids might not be the best word in this case, but whatever. Skyscrapers popping up everywhere. Roads getting a facelift. The works. You know, at the heart of it all, mTOR, the city planner with a god complex, calling all the shots on what gets built or what gets fixed. mTOR is like a master switch that controls the growth and maintenance of the cells in your body. The resources available, like food and energy, and the signals from the environment, like stress and sleep, impact which direction that switch is actually going. Obviously, lots of food means lots of buildings, but if resources are scarce or there's damage that needs fixing, mTOR can switch gears. It tells the cells, hey, hold off building all that new stuff. Let's repair what we have first. Honestly, our body could probably give a masterclass in city planning, but the balance is key. Initially, you might think, why can't we just keep growing? But even the average bodybuilder knows you don't just grow and grow and grow nonstop, right? If mTOR is always on, pushing for growth, it can, in theory, lead to problems like cancer due to the nonstop and indiscriminate growth. And too much repair mode, you might as well just be a couch potato at that point. No gains, no glory, you're slowly wasting away into nothing because, after all, what is there to repair? So what flips mTOR's switch? Amino acids, these little dudes that signal mTOR it's time to get back to building Muscle City. That's why slamming protein post-workout is like sending a fleet of construction trucks to go fix up the damage and beef up that infrastructure. This is a major reason why Americans in particular have such an obsession with protein. Low on those amino acids, or are those trucks getting lost? That's when things start to get iffy, like in things like Hartnup disease or cystinuria, where mTOR doesn't get the memo to build. This obsession with protein, it's not just gym bro lore. It's basically magic for keeping your cells in the best shape possible. Because let's face it, in the grand scheme of things, if you're not growing, you're shrinking. There isn't really a point at which your body is doing nothing. That might be important for later, guys, so don't forget that. I'll say more on this later, but one of the issues with the idea that protein and calories cause cancer is that a lot of this research is done on mice, and most lab mice have a very specific issue, as Matt Kaberlin and Peter Attia discuss in episode 222 of The Drive.
There's a very particular death that tends to fall on laboratory mice. Right. They die of pretty much one thing and one thing alone, and that is...
Actually, it's euthanasia, but I know where you're going.
Good point. Yeah.
Cancer, right?
Yeah, cancer. Yeah. They all die of cancer,
right.
basically.
So certainly every old mouse at time of death will have cancer. And again, because of the way animal studies are done, usually you have defined endpoints where when a mouse reaches that endpoint, they have to be euthanized. But if you let a typical mouse strain in the lab live out its natural life, it will have a very high tumor burden at the end of life, and most likely, I guess I should know this. I don't know exactly. I'm guessing 80% of the animals.
I think it's about 75-80% of them
would die from cancer.
Yeah.
So it's different from humans in that way. And I actually think this is a legitimate criticism to some extent of the interpretation of the caloric restriction literature. Could it be the case that really what caloric restriction is doing is preventing cancer, and that's why you see these big increases in lifespan? And I think that's really difficult to definitively answer one way or the other.
This article goes on to say the percentages of protein, carbs, and fat aren't nearly as important as just getting healthier protein-rich foods instead of specific amino acids. Okay, so why did you link us a macro calculator from Harvard then? Better yet, what is a healthy protein-rich food? Is it another nebulous term vaguely made up to recommend something? Everybody, you have 5 seconds to put down in the comments what food group is Harvard going to call a healthy protein-rich food. Your timer has started now. If you guessed anything besides plants, you hate the planet, and climate change is your fault. They mention how people often hear get more protein and think eat more meat, which is true, most likely due to the people from my world and the decades of chicken, rice, and broccoli. Seriously, if chickens ever become sentient enough to take bodybuilders to court, they will absolutely spank them with genocidal war crimes against chicken humanity. Pultranity? I don't know. But is that association of protein to meat incorrect in any way at all? They say you can get high-quality protein from plant food, which is true. It's not hard to find a vegan or vegetarian bodybuilder, but I mean, calorie to calorie, come on, it's not even a competition. If we go by 100-gram measurements, chicken breast has 3 times the protein and not even double the calories of tofu, 3 times as much protein and barely double the calories of beans, and 50% more protein than almonds and almost 75% less calories. Yes, there is protein in these foods, but if we consider the incredible amount of overconsumption of calories in general by Americans, is it really responsible to say that almonds are a good source of protein when it's going to mean consuming 4 times as many calories? I have always had a huge bone to pick with nuts being treated as a high protein food, but hold on. This does actually bring up an interesting thing to consider. Chicken breast is basically just protein, right? If I haven't made it obvious yet, yes, Americans are obsessed with protein, but I don't think that's a bad thing. In fact, I think it's good. I think more people should be. I believe the reason Americans are so obsessed with protein is because of its implied connection to longevity. Like, think about this. Almost every diet out there has some kind of basis in ratios of some kind, right? Not just like the ratio of protein to carbs and fat, but even things like eating mostly whole foods or eating most of your carbs before the gym. It has me wondering if there's any possibility that longevity is less about decreasing protein, like some experts will say, and more about the mix of what you have on your plate. If there's this perfect ratio for immortality, probably not. But it is important to consider because a lot of protein longevity researchers will point primarily to total calorie intake being the secret to longevity. We partially covered that earlier though. So look, here's a pretty cool paper from 2014 where they tested exactly that, showing that the ratio is pretty significant. We've got this super simple graphic where it shows different ratios of macros as it relates to food intake, adiposity, metabolic health, and lifespan. I would also like to point to this fun little tidbit here where it shows where food intake went up, so did adiposity. Shocked, I tell you, I am shocked. More calories in causes weight gain.
Somebody call the president.
Apparently, chowing down on fewer proteins and more carbs was the ticket to a longer rat life. But here's the kicker. Eating less didn't automatically mean living longer for these little guys. I repeat, less calories in this case did not show an increase in lifespan. But we've got another study from 2014 in humans. The plot twist for humans between 50 and 65, high protein intake is associated with an increased risk of all-cause and cancer mortality. We're talking a 74% increase in their relative risk of all-cause mortality. And we're more than 4 times as likely to die of cancer compared to those in the lower protein group. Okay.
Weird.
But even weirder, because for folks 66 and older, higher protein levels were associated with reduced risks of overall and cancer mortality, suggesting a protective effect of higher protein intake in this older age group. The study notes that this protective effect was not influenced by the ratio of calories from protein, carbs, and fat or animal protein, indicating that the benefits of higher protein intake in older adults might not be source specific. So basically, protein is good for longevity, but only at certain ages? How? The closest idea that I can personally come up with is that it might just be related to different changes in body composition, metabolic requirements, and disease risks that occur with aging. For individuals 50 to 65, the higher risk associated with animal protein intake could be due to the promotion of growth factors like IGF-1, which have been linked to cancer development. In contrast, for those aged 66 and older, protein might be your best friend for limiting muscle loss and frailty. I'm not sure why the 66 and older group wouldn't be dealing with the same risk of cancer, but hey, that's science, baby. The more we understand, the more complex it becomes, especially when you start trying to correlate like half a dozen things like diet and aging and health outcomes and how those things can actually change over a lifetime. Okay, one more curveball for you though. If the ratio of what we're eating matters, what about the order of them? I know for years, I was taught and actively teaching people to eat in this order: veggies, protein, carbs. But not necessarily for longevity. It was to get people satiated quicker so they ate less. One of those little easy coaching tricks, you know? Don't eat less, just eat this way and you will get X outcome. I digress. Someone who goes by the name Glucose Goddess, who by all appearances seems to produce some good info, said something recently regarding food order and some big claims around longevity. Let's listen, shall we?
Number one hack that is incredibly easy, that has fantastic evidence supporting it, is eat your food in the right order. Let's say you have some chicken, some broccoli, and some potatoes, okay? If you eat the elements of this meal in a particular order, you can reduce the glucose spike of the meal by 75%. This means less aging, less inflammation, less weight gain, fewer cravings, etc. The right order is vegetables first, protein and fats second, and starches and sugars last.
I don't think what she says here is harmful per se, but, well, I don't know that what she's saying is accurate as far as longevity goes. Her claim here is that you can slow aging by mitigating the glucose spike by about 75%, right?
75%.
Does eating in this order actually decrease the glucose spike? Kinda. I have a few studies linked in the description, one of which she mentioned where, yes, the order of eating food did lead to to a 75% reduction in blood glucose levels. The longest study I can personally find had them checking blood glucose 180 minutes after eating. Some only 120 minutes and others only 60. In those longer studies, you see about a 30 to 40% reduction, which is still good, but at that 180-minute mark, you see the group that ate their carbs first, they actually have lower blood glucose and insulin than the ones who ate their protein and veggies first. I remember when I was first going through the CHEK Institute, Paul had mentioned how people who have trouble digesting meat sometimes do better if they eat it with papaya or pineapple because of the enzymes in them. So it does make sense in theory that grouping certain foods can be beneficial for certain things in some cases. What it seems like is happening here is that the protein and veggies being grouped up just delay that glucose response instead of just stopping it. There's no free lunch, as they say. The actual quantity of glucose in that meal is still in that meal. So it is possible that there's some benefits for certain populations to be mindful of the groups they eat together and in which order. But what about longevity and the weight loss claims? This kind of got tossed in at the very last second, like a sort of gish gallop, you know? Like, hey, here's 9 things that seem plausible, so here's the 10th one you're not going to argue about now because you're focusing on the other 9. You know, one of these studies actually did measure weight loss, and hey, calories in, calories out was right again. Similar weight loss. For inflammation, I don't really know where she got that from. Maybe it's an inference for diabetics or using processed carbohydrates or something. I'm trying to be generous here because, again, I don't think this is harmful information. I don't see what she could be referencing. All of that to say, I don't know that the order you consume your food in is going to be relevant for longevity unless you are a diabetic. If you like eating this way, I don't think it's bad. I don't think there's any reason to stop. But back to this article. Yet again, the tangents and rabbit holes are why you're here. Let's be real. Finally, it considers how these recommendations apply to the average person with the most common fitness goal. No matter what source you choose, every single year, about 50% of people have a fitness or weight loss goal. So what do they have to say about that? Quote, if weight loss is your main concern, trying a higher protein diet is reasonable, but don't expect it to be a panacea. Patients come to me all the time asking if more protein will help them in weight loss, McManus says. I tell them the verdict is still out. Some studies support it, some studies don't. The verdict is literally not out. It is beyond conclusive. Higher protein diets are more satiating. Of all 3 macros, it has the highest thermic effect of food. It helps you build muscle so that you have a faster metabolism. It decreases your frailty in literally dozens, if not hundreds of ways. So provided your calorie intake is appropriate for your goal, you will lose weight. This isn't maybe irresponsible to say. It is maybe deadly to be saying to the wrong person. Discouraging high protein intake is dangerous health advice. But right after this, we see them accidentally make a really good point. What we see is them saying that not only are Americans getting enough protein, they are actively trying to get more. That isn't the good point, though. Thanks to the miracle of capitalism, most companies are adding protein to pasta, chips, ice cream, cereal, granola, and a ton of other stuff. You know that meme where it's like, oh, the worst person you know just made a great point. That's how I'm feeling right now. This is a huge, nonsensical overcorrection by the market, just trying to capture some doubloons. And no hate at all, but this is no different than people over the last 50 years rolling up with low-fat crackers, low-fat butter, low-fat yogurt, low-fat everything. And what were they doing to make it happen? Were they using great ingredients and sound nutritional guidelines to do it?
They're not sending their best.
Trash. More sugar, more processed crap, more sweeteners and dyes. So it is a logical requirement to go, yeah, they're probably doing some sketchy stuff with the processed, boxed up high protein foods too. But as quickly as this article is right, it suddenly becomes wrong again. Quote, this obsession could be making us sick. No, no, no. The obsession with protein is not making people sick. Excessive protein consumption basically doesn't exist but for very specific compromised populations like folks with kidney issues. There are literally hundreds of studies showing that high protein diets do not harm your kidneys, but let's go with this 2018 meta-analysis that reviewed over 2,000 abstracts on the topic where it showed no change in kidney function with healthy adults consuming low, normal, or high protein diets. You don't say. This doesn't cover the ultra high protein diets like 2 grams per pound of body weight or more, folks, but hey, nobody's going to pretend that bodybuilders are the pinnacle of health anyway, right? But even if we do look at those notable bodybuilders who have died in the last few years prematurely, only one died from renal failure. Lawrence the Beast Marshall at 58 years old. And you know what set him apart from the rest? He had pre-existing kidney issues. I've been debating doing a video on bodybuilder deaths, so if there is interest in that, please let me know in the comments. The danger for the average person eating a high protein diet is evidently not the protein and much more likely the excessive processed food consumption. I just need to pause this to really put this into perspective here. I am not even through the first page of this article. And how long have I been talking now? Seriously, I actually don't know because my scripts aren't timed. It's like probably somewhere around like 25, 30 minutes, but I know it's way too long. Articles like this that make these bold claims with flimsy evidence sound so good. They take literally an hour or less to write and then take dozens of hours to really pick apart and dispute. I'm not even kidding. This script took me 40 hours to write. That quote from Churchill, "A lie gets halfway around the world before the truth has a chance to get its pants on," is remarkably true. What they're very intelligently doing here too is creating as many argumentative appeals and logical fallacies as possible because they sound good until you actually dig into them. Like these next few, for example. 1. Excessive protein consumption, especially from cholesterol-rich animal foods, is correlated with an increased risk of cancer and heart disease. Excessive protein consumption does not do that, except in specific populations. Remember that over 66 group that we saw decreased cancer rates in? But what that article did was smash that sentence right next to cholesterol-rich animal foods, because that's something most people have accepted as truth. This is a trick that I like to call, you didn't notice that, but your brain sure did. Here's an easy way that that is done. If I show you 5 pictures of my dogs at a house fire, you might assume that they are arsonists. They aren't, and you know that consciously because, they don't have silly little thumbs to start a lighter. See, look, no thumbs. Do you hear him? Graves. See, look, Gravy doesn't have thumbs either. But the association is something that your brain starts to make subconsciously. 2, it's a problem for most Americans, especially men. One small informal study in the UK even found that some men who want to reduce their meat consumption are embarrassed to order vegetarian meals among their male friends. Again, a claim where 2 separate things are conflated. Americans, then a small UK study. But it isn't only that. It's also that emotional appeal yet again. Men are embarrassed to eat vegetarian meals. This tells me one of 2 things. The author is either a female who doesn't understand that men just relentlessly roast each other because they care about each other, or it is a guy who is vegan or vegetarian that got made fun of by his buddies for ordering a vegetarian meal and he still hasn't gotten over it. Let's go see. Okay, Kenny Torella, you appear to be at least vegetarian, maybe vegan. You post a lot of climate activism stuff. When you couple that with this article, this is the part where most gym guys would be like, okay, post your physique, as a way to grill you by implying that you have no muscle. Not as a genuine way to hurt your feelings, but to see if it does. I call it roasting rapport. When men insult each other, it works as a test for the quality of that relationship. It shows closeness and comfort by finding the boundaries of that friendship and pushing on them. It's an easy way to think, okay, I'm able to roast you, and since we're friends, you aren't going to freak out and escalate words to physical violence. It also has some basis in anthropology and evolution. If you can't take a joke from your buddies, how will you handle a physical confrontation with an enemy? And I'm not trying to be patronizing saying this to Kenny. I didn't have a dad growing up. I didn't really learn this shit until my teens, and I was a huge whiner as a kid because of it. Anyway, Kenny, stop crying. Go eat an Impossible Burger, you freaking dork. We all know that this is just a self-insert because you took it personally when some of your friends roasted you. Hey, Kenny, that's just some roasting rapport from me. I'm sure you're a nice guy. Excessive protein consumption is also wrecking the planet, with meat and dairy production accounting for upward of 1/5 of greenhouse gas emissions. Again, we are hit with an appeal to emotion and a topic that up until like 6 months ago, I was 100% on board with. Is there some correlation here? Absolutely. Some cause? Sure. On the other hand, 882 private jets left the Super Bowl this year, and I'm going to be charitable and say the average flight was 3 hours long, and that is very charitable. A private jet releases about 52,000 pounds of CO2 in 3 hours. So with those 882 jets, in less than a day, they produced 46,305,000 pounds of CO2 in one day. That doesn't even count them flying there, or picking some friends up along the way, or dropping them back off. We are much more likely in the ballpark of 150 million pounds. So I've done the math. I eat about 2 grass-fed cows per year that I buy from a farmer. I'll have the details on the screen for this because I had ChatGPT do some of this math for me. The methane produced from 2 cows over their lifetime converted into its CO2 equivalent is about 35,000 pounds. So if I divide that 150 million by 35,000 pounds, that means that I need to eat 2 cows a year for 4,300 years just to match the amount of CO2 made by Taylor Swift and Kanye and everybody else that wanted to go to the Super Bowl. And then, of course, there's next year too. We're not going to go down this next rabbit hole because this video would be like 2 hours long, but there is also something called the carbon cycle, where greenhouse gas emissions released from cows are eventually reabsorbed by the plants in the soil. So yeah, that's what a lot of this article does. It goes down a few more silly little roads that are ultimately meaningless distraction from just eating more whole foods. Like, oh, the people who eat the most animal protein also eat the least plant protein. Yeah, that's how it works. Your pie chart is full of something. That means there will be less room for something else. And then it's Americans meet or exceed protein recommendations for meat, poultry, and eggs, but fail to meet most recommendations for nuts, seeds, seafood, and soy products. Again, this author believes that 50 grams of protein is enough. Most people don't get enough magnesium or vitamin D or omega-3s in their diet. To hit every single dietary recommendation is nearly impossible without excessive supplementation. And likely not even good due to all the generalities of these recommendations. Then it hits the most boring topic when it comes to plant-based people. Do they get enough protein? This is seriously one of the most tired, boring jokes in the fitness world. Vegans and vegetarians can get enough protein to survive and even thrive and build a lot of muscle. People who say they can't are stupid, and plant-based people who want a pat on the back because they get enough protein are also stupid. Then there's this line about not needing to worry about protein unless you're bodybuilding, with a link to an article that conveniently doesn't mention how much protein you do need if you're going to be bodybuilding. It talks about fiber intake and nutrient deficiencies for plant-based folks. Okay, fine. Here's the thing. This article is absolutely bait, and they got Brett Cooper from the Daily Wire, people on Twitter, random gym pages, Steven Crowder, all to take the bait. And I guess technically I'm taking the bait too, but you guys asked me to, and I'm a giver, you know? But are we wrong for taking the bait? Say people are overeating protein and treat it like some disordered pattern of eating is irresponsible. It is bordering on propaganda even, because when you really dig into the claims that are made in this article, what is it that they offer as a backup? Well, one thing is a lot of articles that it references are behind paywalls, which, well, it's not bad to source an article like this when you know that there's a paywall and you could just link the sources instead. It kind of is, right? But then it goes from one article to another where they all have the same basic claims and the same basic sources. This is more or less the flow chart that they follow. 1, people are eating too much protein. 2, meat is a major source of protein for these people. 3, meat will raise your cholesterol and kill you. 4, meat is also bad for the environment. Oh no. 5, that's scary. You might die. Oh no. 6, or the planet might die. Oh no. 7, oh, you still want some protein? Here's some plant-based ones. These are better. 8, these are cheaper and they're better for you and they're better for the environment. Then if you do like 17 seconds of research, you realize that these are all incomplete proteins, monocrops covered in glyphosate, or that the amount of protein they consider adequate is literally just so you don't die. Or they come from sources that so many people have intolerances to. Then nearly all of these, when they wrap up, present you a plant-based lifestyle as a solution. Look, guys, I don't know concretely why there's this huge push to plant-based protein and away from meat. At least, I don't know how to say it without sounding like a conspiracy theorist, but let's break it down simply to this. There will come a point in our life where growth is overtaken with breakdown. Entropy is coming for all of us as we get older. So ultimately, why is protein so important? Why are so many people, especially Americans, obsessed with protein? Because as we approach our inevitable demise, all we can really do is build ourselves up so we can start at the highest point possible as we slowly slide our way down. If you have more muscle, if you have more strength, you are agile, you are more resilient, and you will recover more effectively. And your slide down will be slower than most. Jack LaLanne died at 96, and you know what he did the morning before he passed? He hit the gym, he ate some meat and eggs, just like he did pretty much every other day. Are Americans obsessed with protein? Sure. But if we see it lead to healthier, longer lives, is obsession really bad? See, look at this, guys. No thumbs. Not even on these back feet. You got no thumbs at all. How are you going to be an arsonist? You can't. You can't. If you like this video, you should absolutely check out that top one linked right here, episode 70. People are saying that exercise is bad for you. That was a doozy of a study to break down. Or check out this bottom one right here to see what I've been up to more recently. Until next time, guys, my name's Andrew with Holistic Motion. See y'all later.